Welcome to the Relation Stitch podcast, where we discuss theoretical and spiritual principles related to relationships, marriages, family, and parenting. I'm your host, Clyde Fraley, licensed marriage and family therapist with my wife and co-host, Stephanie. Let's get started.
Today we are talking about fighting.
Conflict resolution. We never fight, though.
Never, ever. We have a perfect marriage.
Yeah, right.
I don't think I could even say that with a straight face.
This is our third take. You think we're fighting yet? No, we're having fun. But no, every couple fights. Every couple has conflict because we're individuals and we have different ideas about things. And it's how you come to resolution. It's how you come to understanding that's important. So it's not that couples don't have conflict. It's how much resolution do you have with that conflict. And conflict can actually be good.
Yeah. And how quickly you can come to the resolution.
That's
right?
important.
Yeah.
You don't want to stew. And we're going to get into part 2 on our next one and give you the techniques about how to resolve conflict and get to agreement, compromise, or understanding. But today we're just going to break down the different kind of conflicts and kind of the root of where they come from.
Right. Because that probably understanding why there's conflicts adds a lot to your ability to being able to resolve it.
Yeah. You want to find the deeper meaning of things. And not everything has to have a deeper meaning, but if you're in conflict over the same thing over and over again, you might have to go deep with that.
Yeah.
And so the way that you do that is you get to know your partner better, and that brings patience and understanding. And then you can work on that. But we'll get into that in the next episode, like techniques and things like that. So what's the first kind of, I don't know if you call it a category or style of fighting, or I think they're just points of view, So what's the first one?
I think the very first one would be over right and wrong.
I think that's probably the root of it. Because if I always agreed with you, I don't know that we would ever fight, would we?
That's probably not.
Maybe we would. I don't know. But it's always about a difference of opinion or point of view.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I may be, you may be in the middle of a conflict and you're like, I know what I am saying is right. And what you are saying is you're saying I'm right in my position too. And both could be right. But there's always more to the story, right?
Mm-hmm. So there's things that are absolute. 2 + 2 is 4. But then there's other things where you might only have a portion of the truth, right? And so like this pen, for example, I'm holding up a pen and I could say, this pen is long, and you might say, well, no, it's kind of round. Both are true. My truth is, and your truth is truth to you. Until we put that together, then we have a complete picture of what's going on, which is why communication is important. That way we can get to that understanding. Oh, what you're saying is true. It's long and it's round at the same time. Now we have a more complete idea of what's going on. And that's how we start to solve the problem. But every one of these points we're going to make, it boils down to this thing about, right and wrong. So talking about that, the first one could be cultural differences. Do we have any of those?
A little bit, yeah. So,
but we're both Americans,
right?
We're both white,
Midwesterners.
So how can we have different cultures?
Right. So my culture, my family upbringing, we were middle class. We did fine. We weren't, driving no crazy cars, but we had a comfortable living. But your cultural upbringing was very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We, were on government assistance for a minute. And, I had the punch card at school for the free lunch, and I knew what it meant to wait in line for a block of cheese, government cheese. All of those were my experiences. So imagine how we may see money differently, and
money.
And so I might be more anxious about money than you are,
right?
And things like that.
Or we may have different definitions of fried chicken.
Oh boy, here we go.
So
I'm getting triggered already. I need my safe word. Avocado.
Sassafras fancy pants. So Our very first fight was over fried chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And it was we actually often, when we do presentations or give talks, we use this example because it really is the perfect way to really illustrate how different upbringings, different cultures can create this different view of the exact same situation. So for me, we're married 2 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited to make my husband fried chicken. But in my family, we were pretty healthy eaters. We a lot of fruits, vegetables, so we didn't really fry anything. But in your family, you had, more like kind of southern roots, and so when you guys talked about fried chicken, you guys did it right.
Yeah, my dad was trying to crack the code for Colonel Sanders,
Secret recipe.
secret recipe. So it was a couple gallons of oil and a pressure cooker and flour and I mean the whole thing. And so
Right.
that was fried chicken for us.
So all day long you were thinking about, I can't wait to get home to get my fried chicken. And he had a picture in his mind of what fried chicken was. And I was so proud of myself. I had made my husband this wonderful meal and, something that would taste great but was healthy. But when that plate hit the table, conflict began, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Here's your fried chicken. I'm
This
like, it's
ain't fried
good, but it ain't fried chicken.
And I said, yes, it is. It's fried chicken.
Mm-hmm. And so the culture, so there's the right and the wrong thing. You thought you were right, and that's how you defined it. And a part of that was probably true because you probably did some of the techniques that you would with fried chicken, like you battered it and all that. And so I get why there was some confusion there. But then the culture piece, that was how you were raised. And there's so many things like that in relationships where your culture, and so culture can be what your culture was like growing up in your house. And it could be, and so that can be what you're taught about money, what you're taught about religion, what you're taught about politics, and all of your rituals and all of your traditions come into play. And so a lot of conflict can come out of that because as couples, you might want to recreate that experience in your family. So Christmas is another good example where I need a ton of boxes under the tree. It has to be full. I want that wow factor for the kids. Your family, it was like you got better gifts, but there weren't quite as many gifts.
Right.
And so that's a thing. And so I'm trying to recreate this thing for my kids, and you're trying to recreate this thing for our kids,
Right.
And so
there's conflict.
there's conflict. And so that's where that comes from. It's like I want to give my kids this experience, and you want to give this kids your experience, and that's important to us, and that's why it turns into a fight. This is we're fighting over
Right.
Christmas.
Right. Exactly. What do you mean you're going to go make another run to the store on Christmas Eve? We had an agreed budget. We knew exactly. I bought the kids the best presents. I bought them all the things that they wanted. It's Christmas is going to be perfect. And it's what I'm thinking. And you're thinking there's empty spaces.
Yeah, Zach could have a new car in the driveway, but it's only one gift.
That
not
is
enough.
exactly what you would say.
know?
But it's only one gift. It's a new car. What are you talking about?
Zach, if you're listening, you're not getting a new car. for
You are
Christmas.
not getting a new car.
So culture, traditions, and rituals are some. Those are like bedrock things for us.
Yeah.
And so that's why conflict can arise out of that. So there's another one. I call them I definitions, and these are the things that we make associations, with our experiences in these big themes in our life.
Right. So I may say, I love you, but I love you could mean different things to different people.
Yeah. So we have this universally agreed upon definition of things like love. So if I asked you about love, you could give me a definition of what maybe Webster's would say or the Bible would say, and I would agree with that actually. But in the middle of conflict, you don't default to that definition. You default to the I definition, which is what I have learned through my experience of what love is, you know? So an example is you got little Tommy and he's at home and his dad comes home drunk and he hits and abuses Tommy. And the next day he comes home sober and he tells his son, "Look, son, I'm sorry I hit you. I was drunk. I'm not going to do that again." 2 days later, dad comes home. Tommy's at the table doing homework, gets abused again. The next day, dad comes home sober. "Tommy, I'm really sorry. I love you. And I'm never going to do that again. I really, really love you." And if that's his experience growing up, he's defining love completely different
Right. So when
than little Sally is,
Right.
who got love and tenderness and kindness and patience.
So Sally's saying, I don't understand. I love you so much. Why are you resisting that? Why are you putting up walls? I love you. I love you.
Hmm.
But to him, he can't see it the same way, can he?
No, because he associated that term, love, with his experience, which was abuse, which was addiction, abandonment. And so when his wife approaches him, "I love you," he's going to get triggered and it's going to make him panic and he's maybe going to run, fight, flight, or freeze. He might go into one of those states and that, you know,
And
those are
maybe he
those.
doesn't even realize it too. Like I'm am not a therapist, but you probably see this often with your clients where maybe people have reactions to things that they don't even realize why they're reacting that way. Would that be true?
Yeah, that is true because that it's become so normalized. And again, if we go back and talk about our culture and our family of origin, that's a part of their culture too: abuse, neglect, abandonment. So when they meet someone that has a different experience that doesn't have as much trauma or dysfunction, it's healthier for them, but they don't know how to navigate that. And it becomes really confusing for them and it scares them. That's why they pick certain people, you know, someone that kind of matches their flow and it's toxic, but they know how to navigate it. And so it's not healthy, but it's familiar. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, the way that we define things in our life and these big themes can definitely cause huge conflict. And we're gonna, like I said in episode 3 in our next podcast, we're gonna talk about the techniques that we can use to work through these things. So what's another one?
Well, this one I think is probably the most challenging, and that's a difference in morals or values.
Hmm. I'll start by saying it's easier to get married to someone that aligns with you in your morals and your values, but that's not always the case. So we need we need to address it, you know. And so the reason that's huge conflict is because I'm thinking about Carl Rogers and the person-centered therapy approach, and one of the things that he talks about is this concept of incongruency. And so, if you have this belief system, this moral or this value, but you don't live that way, there's an incongruency there, and that can cause anxiety and mental health issues. You know, because you're not living to your true self. You know, and the morals or values are super important. And you already know this is because we're basing our life decisions on those really important things. And so values and morals are like, can be rooted in religion and the things that you were taught by your parents, you know, and maybe it's a political point of view and the things that you see in the world and the way that you see justice and injustice and all of these rights and wrongs, the way you see the world. And and so, man, how are you going to resolve that?
Yeah. Because I can understand your point of view on, the fried chicken situation or the Christmas situation. You can say, okay, I know he's going to want to, spend more money. So maybe I leave a little extra in the budget. That's something that can be navigated. But when we're talking about morals and values, those are hard to compromise on. Those are hard to find middle ground and try to find something where we can say, okay, we can have some commonality there because they're diametrically opposed in some situations. So yes, the absolute best case scenario is you don't enter into a relationship where there's not agreement and consistency when it comes to those core things. But that's not always the case, and so you're going to have to find some ways to navigate that, which I think we'll talk about that in the next episode. But that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah, we'll get into techniques about how we can work through that. But what I see with couples that have these differences with morals and values, they end up becoming polite and they become roommates. It's hard for them to go deep because they can't connect on the deep things because they see differently on it.
Yeah, that's true. So it
Like,
ended up becoming a very superficial type of a relationship.
yeah, it's like I want to talk about my Muslim faith with my partner who's a Christian. Imagine that scenario, how difficult that could be. I want to talk about my democratic points of view, and you want to talk about your independent or Republican or,
Right.
whatever points of view. They're, like you said, they're diametrically opposed.
Right.
So we got some techniques for that.
I think the really key thing is, like you said, it's something that can be navigated, but it's difficult. Really, what it's going to take in order to navigate that type of a situation is, both people have to be so committed to the relationship that they're willing to find a way to work through that, because we're talking about an unresolvable, likely unresolvable and perpetual conflict there. There's not going to be agreement unless something dramatic changes. And I do think in that kind of situation, it's unfair to enter a relationship with the understanding that somebody's going to change one of those. Because I seen that too. Well, that's okay. We'll get married and hope that they change their mind. You're setting yourself up for a very difficult situation.
So you're saying I shouldn't missionary date? What is that? You know what that is, right?
Yes, when you're dating somebody with the hopes that they change their ways, that they become a believer, or you're like, oh, that's okay. I can lead him to the Lord. That's probably not going to work too well.
Yeah, keep trying, but don't marry him.
Exactly. Exactly. Keep witnessing, but maybe wait a while.
No missionary dating.
No missionary dating, no missionary marriage. So that one's tough. Moral values. But then there could be some things that are more just preferences.
Yeah, that's the next one. Personal preferences. We get into a lot of unnecessary arguments over those things.
Over silly things
Yeah.
that don't matter. I want you to take the trash out now. Well, I want to take the trash out in 2 hours. Does the trash get taken out at the end of the day? Does it really matter when it happens? That's a preference. That's something that maybe doesn't need to be an argument.
It should be a preference, but what happens is people get offended. You didn't hear me, or you're ignoring me, or I'm not important in the things that I have to say. You just doing that on your own time, and that feels disrespectful to me. And people can filter it that way, but you're going to have a little bit thicker skin in a relationship and not be so offended all the time, And there's this concept of tolerance versus acceptance, which falls into this. Are you going to tolerate it, or are you going to accept it with things of preference? So I used to, get on Stephanie because she had an iPhone and she was a part of that culture. And I'm Android, and we would have fun about that. And then one day I saw her on her phone and she loved it. And she was really happy, and so I was just like, I went from tolerating it to accepting it, And you mentioned perpetual and unresolvable conflict. The Gottmans say that 69% of our conflict, in fact, falls into that. And if we can resolve the easy things, and just give each other, don't be so selfish all the time, If you want the Apple phone, go ahead. Yeah, who cares? Why does that bother me so much? If I want the blue one and you want the green one, it's like, who cares? That's an easy win, man. Think about that. Give into that little stuff. You know what I mean? And show that you are not so uptight about stuff. Women too, of course,
Yeah.
but
I was just going to say that goes for women too. Like, does it really matter how the towels are folded? You know, you, is that really something that's worth fighting over? Is how something is done or when something is done? Or it's like, okay, let's give each other some grace here, and I think preference is definitely one of those ones where it leads to conflicts that don't need to be there.
yeah. And sometimes those easy things become conflict because some partners want to springboard to talk about deeper things, and they'll use that as a way to get there. But that's not the best way to go about that.
So it's becoming it's more like just the irritant that really is pointing to something deeper.
It's
That
the straw
yeah, exactly.
a lot of times.
And I think that is exactly why these types of conversations are important, is so that you can recognize, okay, why am I getting so angry right now? What's really happening here? Because understanding ourselves and how we are reacting to situations, I think could be really important to even avoiding some conflicts.
So what we have to do is get to the deeper meaning.
Right.
Get to the deeper meaning and figure out what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Okay. One more that I'm thinking about is the spirit versus the law. And this has a lot to do with personality types. So let's say, Stephanie, you're really creative and artistic, and the way you think is more free flowing and abstract. Or maybe I'm an engineer and my thinking is very linear and very analytical, and everything that I say is very specific. And so when I say we were going to leave at 6:23, that's exactly what I mean. And so if you come down at 6:30, I'm going to be really upset about that, but maybe you're not.
Or how much did something cost? I don't know, like $50.
That's a really good example. So if I ask you, or you show me the receipt and it's $59, yeah, it's in the 50s, but I'm like, no, it's really actually closer to $60.
Right.
So that can cause a lot of conflict.
Right.
So understanding your personalities, and again, this goes into technique. It's like you have to understand your partner, and if you need to be more specific with them, then do that.
Yeah.
It's okay. We have to know our partner, and we have to kind of meet them where they're at, and they're going to meet you where you're at, hopefully, because you have your own idiosyncrasies that they have to deal with. Don't think that you're perfect. We're all very different, and we're taking these two very different things. Just the male-female thing alone is massive. We didn't even get into that, right? The gender thing. And so mashing these two things together, can be difficult. Now, we don't want to be the same, though.
Right. Yes, we are very different people.
Yeah. And so sometimes you can combine things that are very different and it doesn't work, like oil and water. But peanut butter and jelly, that's very different.
Mac and cheese.
Man, those things work great together. Peanut butter and jelly with mac and cheese?
No.
I'm going to try it. Could be a thing. Could be a thing. No, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what you want there, you want to be complementary.
Yes.
You want to work together because you have skills and abilities that I don't have, and strengths, and the same with me. And so if we can combine those, and this goes into our first episode about the work,
Marriage is work, yeah.
what you're good at and what I'm good at, and we put that together, we have a lot of momentum and a lot of strength, and we can overcome anything.
Right.
But we let this conflict divide us. And we can't do that. We can't look at conflict as something that's negative. We have to look at this as an opportunity for us to get to know each other and to become stronger.
Right. Right.
So that's really important. And so we're gonna, in the next episode, help you guys with some techniques on each one of these things. How do we get through the culture differences? How do we understand the difference between right and wrong and perspective, and the I definitions of morals and values and personal preferences and all those things. We got some worksheets we're going to put on the website too that you guys can download. So
Yeah.
hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'm looking forward to the next episode where we'll talk about practical type situations. But I think that the big takeaway that I have from all of this is that, number one, conflict is not necessarily bad. It can be very healthy. It can be very fruitful. It can lead to better and stronger relationships. But I also think that the second big takeaway is, in the midst of conflict, recognizing that there's two people who have different perspectives, and I can't change yours, but I can change mine. And so when we understand where the conflict is coming from, which is why this is so important, it leads us to a better place where we can be reflective and try to see it from somebody else's point of view. And then that gets us to that point where we can resolve the conflict much faster.
That's good, honey.
Good.
You're so smart.
So are you. You're pretty hot too.
Oh, thank you. She's only saying that because it's Father's Day, but I'll take it.
I say it every day.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. Visit RelationStitch.com for free downloadable worksheets related to this episode and to access our relationship courses. If you're struggling in your relationship, go to RelationStitch.com to leave a prayer request or to schedule a therapy session with Clyde.